not? The concept was that Italy as we know it today was just a conglomerate of lots and lots of different states, different little territories, all independent one from the other, and they did not particularly get on with one another, but they sometimes did, sometimes didn't, because of foreign powers outside the Italy as we know it today. So when I say Italy, remember, it's not in those days, and we have powerful families, powerful names that emerged from such a very obscure, if you like, at times, history, including, of course, Europe. And if you can imagine a huge cauldron in which all historical ingredients have smoldered over a period of time, this has happened in order to prepare for the starting point on my story tonight. And the date that we will focus on is Naples 1735. Before we get to that date, I will give you a very, very quick, if you come with me on the time machine, very, very quickly on a special elevator or wherever you like, on the wings of Pegasus, we'll go and see quite a perturbing story, because who was in Naples? Who were the Neapolitans? Well, before the arrival of this King Carlo, who's my hero. So from the Normans to the Habsburgs, centuries of foreign powers left a deep trail of desolation and misery. We're talking about centuries here, and in addition to these terrible tyrants who descended on Naples, we observed, we know that so many natural disasters befell on the city. Plague, eruptions, earthquakes, and floods, and if that were not enough, the Spanish Inquisition. I always remember John Cleese when I say that, but this was the real Spanish Inquisition. In the story tonight, we will have 4 major protagonists to my story. Of course, the first principal person is, of course, Carlo III. Then we have the other protagonists, we have Naples. The other protagonist is the populace of Naples, the people, la gente di Napoli, e poi avremo l'arrivo di una regina, perché un re senza una regina le cose non sempre sono complete. So we have the arrival not only of a queen, of king, but then soon after you will see we have the arrival of the queen. So we have now a little bit of a background, and if I can again rush through history, let's concentrate a little bit more on, say, the 500 and the 600. So we have a period of intense dominions, foreigners who couldn't care less about what was happening in Naples, what the people were going to go through with all the misery, death, desolation, etc. These were people, foreign powers, you name it, we had them coming through and settling in Naples at times over a period of a century each. So, you know, you're talking about a long history of calamities. So the Neapolitans, bless them, they did very well to survive because they went through some terrible, terrible misery. And of course, so many people died, and infant mortality was striving there. And so we have not a very happy image of what was going on. However, if I bring you to about the 600, so the period where in Naples we have the descents of the Spaniards. Now, when I say the Spaniards, the Spanish crowns, these were the people who were very happy in their own countries, but not in the way we mean today. They were happy there to raise armies so that they could go and invade different territories to get more power. So it's a very pretty gloomy picture. Spain, France, Middle Europe as we know it today, like for example the Polish crowns, the Habsburgs with the Austrians, and you have all a great melee of states and kingdoms who were very, very powerful and they were looking elsewhere for more power. Sometimes they were fighting among themselves in these European kingdoms. Sometimes they were fighting to occupy other territories, and sometimes internal fights because of wars of inheritance, of succession. These people were all after male heirs. Now, this is another problem, and I will come to that later on. So you have turmoil. Wherever you looked, the European ones were very, very powerful because they had more territory, they had more people, whereas Naples was on its own in a very interesting position and unique, if you like, in the Mediterranean. They were in Naples, a very attractive proposition, because if you had the port of Naples, the Bay of Naples, you controlled really the Mediterranean. So we have over the centuries this great appeal, and the poor Neapolitans, of course, they didn't know anything. This is something to appreciate now, after all these centuries. Neapolitans at this time of our stories, coming through the 15th century, 16th centuries, and then the 17th and the 18th centuries, these people could not speak Italian, they could not speak anything else, bless them, and they were always invaded by foreign powers. And of course, that didn't make their linguistic skills possible at all. So they only spoke Neapolitan, okay, which was a different sort of language, if you like, altogether. It wasn't a dialect as such, but that's a different story. So in all these powerful people, what looms on the horizons is one name. Of course, you will know other names of famous dynasties, famous families, but one family of enormous power is the Bourbon family. The Bourbon family, why is it so powerful? For many reasons, but because it's a double family. In other words, is a big tree with two massive branches coming off this tree. And one Bourbon family was in France, and one Bourbon family was in Spain. Who were they? They were all related. They were all related, and very, very often they were friendly. Some of the times they were not, but they were all after male heirs, and not always they were lucky enough to get a boy in the family. So we have positions of pressure everywhere encircling the poor Naples, who was never free to look after their own people. Why? Because these foreign powers very often didn't even go to Naples. They couldn't care less. They were staying in their own countries. So what would they do to exercise their power? They would send emissaries. They would send the dreaded viceroys, the people who were governing instead of, they were governing for the king, while the king was elsewhere doing his own things, doing his own conquests, etc., etc. But the viceroys had the power, if you like, vice in the position instead of the king in Naples, and they were tyrants. They were terrible administrators. They were there for a very simple purpose. They were there to make money. They were there to take away all the poor people's rights, to take away whatever little they had. But in some cases, of course, there were some riches hidden away. And so we have a position, a very weak position, because of course all these powers getting in, all these viceroys, they were absolutely cruel, each one of them dishonest, they were murderers, they were, wherever they were to corrupt the people who lived there. So we start now with showing you one picture which looks so serene, and it's an 18th century picture, and the lovely bay looks ever so beautiful and calm. You've got little smoke coming out of Vesuvius, but as I've told you, there have been some terrible devastations and earthquakes, but not in this picture. Now, this particular map is a topographic representation of Naples at the times of the Spanish viceroys, who were so hated by everybody, but not everybody. They were paying the local mafia, if you like. And by the way, for the people who follow Italian events, you might have heard that from the mafia in Italy, even today, we have another branch of the mafia that's called Camorra. Believe it or not, in this map, that is an 18th century map, you will see on the left-hand side something that says Spanish quarters. Can you see it is on the left side of the screen? Now, they brought with them not only the viceroys, but they brought the Camorra. The Camorra, believe it or not, is a Spanish word that goes back to that century, and the people who belonged to the Camorra were the Camorristi, just as it is today. And the Camorristi, sadly, were the Neapolitans who were desperate, without food, without jobs, and of course they fell in the cruel, dishonest, criminal hands of the Camorra. So you have some other Neapolitans, of course, living there, but they were lost, because if you were not educated, which was the highest percentage of them, you didn't have where to turn for a very honest living. You just didn't have the sea. Yes, okay, you could go and fish, but then what happens? Whatever you fished out of the sea, whatever you produce maybe in a little orchard, because of course Naples wasn't built in those days, the viceroys were immediately after you because you had to pay taxes. Whatever they produced, whatever they got, whatever they fished was heavily taxes. They were called le gabelle. Le gabelle is an old-fashioned word for tax. And the taxes were so unjust and so heavy on these poor people who could not buy bread to put on the table. And so then you can just imagine, you look at the Spanish quarters, you look at the very top, immediately above, right at the top, there is Castel Sant'Elmo. That is the place where I lived in Naples. So it's very dear to me, and I know quite a lot about that area. And as you can see, is on top of a hill. And coming down from Castel Sant'Elmo in the zone now called Vomero, then you went down through little steps or through country alleys, little orchards. You went down on the Spanish quarters. The Spanish quarters were all steps and hilly grounds, and they were the headquarters for the police, for the soldiers, for the Spanish viceroy's men. And up to this day, we call them I quartieri spagnoli. So the name has remained. Of course, now it's a different story. We haven't got time for that. But if you look at down from the Spanish quarters, you see Palazzo Reale. Now, this Palazzo Reale is at the time of the Spanish viceroys, and it was actually built in the time of the Spanish viceroys. Then, if you move to the right, you have, of course, the port of Naples. And if you can look on the right, south, you see Piazza del Mercato. Now, if you can remember where it is, it will make more sense in a minute. Piazza del Mercato, Market Square. And you can see actually the distance between this Piazza del Mercato and the Palazzo Reale, so more or less in opposite directions. So the history moves on because every time somebody from Spain, from France, from Poland, from Austria, every time somebody lost a war, lost battles for this inheritance and for the succession, every time then it was concluded by a congress. And things were decided, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But it was like musical thrones, if you like. Naples became a musical kingdom when one lot are in and a new lot, the winners, are in Naples. And they, unfortunately, will bring different viceroys. So this was happening, gli Spagnoli, they were happening in the 1500, going into the 1600. And after them, we have the last big invasion, if you like, of the Habsburgs. From Austria, what we call Austria today, Poland, Saxony, etc. And so we will now concentrate, because we're coming very near our story now. We have the position of who are these Habsburgs? Well, the Spanish before, the terrible viceroys, the ones were sent by the Catholic kings, Ferdinand and Isabel, the Catholic couple. But they were too busy. They were conquering or trying to conquer Mexico, and all sorts with the conquistadors. They were after money, immense fortunes, but they were fighting their own people in Spain. So we leave them now. They're gone. They have gone. Thank God for that, the Neapolitans say. But the Neapolitans have no idea who's coming next. And they unfortunately have a collective memory of oppression, death, and tyranny and dishonesty. So they were obviously very apprehensive. The new lot comes in, the Habsburgs. Do they come in person? No, they don't. They send the viceroys. Another very terrible lot. So nobody's happy again. And then Neapolitans think, what is the point of going on living? But unfortunately, for the other people who were foreigners, unfortunately for the Neapolitans, they get their hope and their strength to carry on. And thank goodness their wait ends at last, but they don't know it yet, in 1735. The liberator comes. Who is he? Who is this person? They don't even know his name. Well, this is my king. I call him my king, if you don't mind, Carlo III. Where is he from? Which family does he come from? Well, he belongs to the Bourbon branch of Spain. Why? I'll tell you why. Because we have a very important Spanish king at this time called Philip V of Bourbon, and he sadly loses his first wife. He has one male heir that will be very probably at this stage he will be following his father in the Kingdom of Spain. But Philip V has his eye on a very powerful woman who happens to be in an Italian state, which is very powerful indeed. And the woman in question is Isabella Farnese. Now, what we have this communion, these two people already rich. Now, La Farnese, the Farnese is a duchessa. She's a duchess in the Duchy of Parma e Piacenza. A massive fortune is in the coffers. They are absolutely swimming in money in Parma e Piacenza. And then, of course, the King of Spain has got his own fortunes. So we have Carlo emerges out of this second marriage and is so the first son of Farnese. He is brought up at this time is in the court in Spain of Madrid, and he is educated with the most incredible thoroughness because he's passionate about culture, is very, very bright, and he wants to learn. And if I can move to the next picture, we see a gate, if you like, or a door, we call it porta. Una porta capuana. This porta capuana, if you keep staring at it, you'll see Carlo coming through it in a minute. Carlo is a very, very lucky man. He's born under the right star. But as you see in a minute, he deserves every possible advantage. And advantages and honors and riches just pour on his head, literally. Because what happens now is that this young man, very, very beautifully educated, with all the accoutrement of Latin, all the arts, philosophy, you know, like a proper gentleman would in those days, with the best tutors, this young man thinks about something perhaps of a different nature. He knows he's rich. He doesn't quite know to what an extent, but he wants to move, to go places. And the opportunity arrives when we have one Spanish war of succession, and then another war is the Habsburgs, the Polish war of succession. And this young man says, right, I'm off. I am going to fight because I want to try the battlefield. I am not just studying. I want to study for the rest of my life, but I want to fight and I want to see what I can experience there. And this young man is lying about his age. You wouldn't believe it. He was only just 18, and normally they couldn't have got, not even a king's son could have gone into battles of that nature. But no, he goes into battle, and he fights in charge of men. He becomes the leader. It becomes a generalissimo or generalissimo, and his men follow him blindly. This man, Carlo, is charismatic. He cares for his men, and the men love him. And so he goes from battle to battle, victory to victory, and lo and behold, he's the winner of the final battle. And so he's now in a very, very, even more privileged position that he was in before. Why? Is what happens now. The Congress, the Third Congress of Vienna, decides, stipulates that the winner, Carlo, is going to inherit something big for a lad who's only about, now will be about 19, 20. He is going to inherit, now this is what fortune accumulates on his head, because the mother, who's of course married now to the Spanish king, and is very nicely, thank you, she is the Spanish queen. Therefore, she doesn't need any money whatsoever. She is now going to give the Duchy of Parma e Piacenza to Carlo, to a firstborn. And what does that mean? It means that the massive treasury, we call it il tesoro Farnese. The Farnese, remember, was the name of the mother's family. And it's massive. What is it? What does it consist of? Well, it consists in the treasure of antiquity, everything that is most precious, from the Greek, the Roman, paintings, then later on, is absolutely a mine, a gold mine. So he inherits that, but is he going to stay there? No, because he's got a better proposition. And what happens is this, that, as you remember, I told you, the Habsburgs and the viceroys were in Naples. They lose the battles, so they're out, and the throne of Naples is vacant. And so here he comes to Naples as the king of Naples, and he comes through this door called Porta Capuana. Next, please. Right. Here he is, bless him. It is not exactly the most handsome man, but he is an amazing man, as I've already described. He has a will of iron. And there he is. Of course, this particular picture must have been done, executed years after his entrance in Naples. But here is Carlo, and I picked this one because he's wearing an armor. Why? Because I want you to tell you very quickly the story. This is true of what happens when he comes through that door, the Porta Capuana in Naples. Is the 10th of May, 1735. He is on his horse, wearing his armor, and is followed by his men, and the populace of Naples is assembling and congregating in that Piazza Mercato that I showed you earlier. This Piazza Mercato is absolutely full to the brim. People, the poor people of Naples, the people who don't have anything, almost lost hope, but they want to see, they're very curious. Who's this new king? And what does he want? But is it true? Is it half Italian? And some people, as you know, even if they're ignorant, they always seem to know more than other people. And they say, yes, he's half Italian. Hooray, shout everybody. This is the man for us. It must be sent to us. It's our fate. Now, remember, the Neapolitans are among the most superstitious people that in the whole of the states of Italy. They at the time, they believe in everything that's almost magical, and they think, well, this is it, this is the king comes to us. But wait a minute, he's wearing an armor. Why is he wearing an armor? Should we be afraid? But suddenly the king has arrived, Piazza Mercato, and the king stops, lifts his arm, and shouts in a very clear voice, "Addo sta San Gennaro?" He's shouting in Neapolitan. He's not even using Italian, he's using Neapolitan. And the people stop, silent. And one little man at the front says, "Maestà, your majesty, maestà, sembra dritto," and which means straight on, straight on. And he puts his arm out, indicating the direction, straight on, sembra dritto, sembra dritto. And the king salutes everybody, and the crowds have sort of come round after the shock of this incredible little phrase of the king. And the king moves on in that direction, and all the men after it, and a voice from the back of the crowd shouts, "Questo è une nostro, o re, è une nostro." Neapolitan meanings, the king is one of us. He's going to see San Gennaro, our patron saint. He knows, he loves San Gennaro. Of course, he doesn't know San Gennaro, but they think he does. And the first thing he wants to do is to go and visit San Gennaro. And where is San Gennaro? Well, San Gennaro sounds like a real person. Well, not any longer. San Gennaro was a martyr who became a Christian in Roman times, and blessing, things didn't go very well for him, because then he was decapitated and his head chopped off, and some pious women apparently collected some of his blood from his head and put it in a little bottle, in a little container, glass container, and then ran away. So from time immemorial, we then, or rather the Neapolitans, do believe into this miraculous San Gennaro, who's the protector. So what a start is really un coup de théâtre, is something that only Carlo could do, because Carlo had learned, had studied beforehand what the situation was in Naples. Who did they go for help, for solace? And he knows about San Gennaro. And so San Gennaro, believe it or not, a few months before had actually done the miracle. The blood of San Gennaro had melted, as if San Gennaro said, "I'm sending you a man, and this is my man. Believe in him, he will see you right." So now we have the second, the third, actually. Now, hang on, we found we mentioned Carlo, we got Naples, we got the Neapolitans, we're getting to know them, and now we have a lovely lady. Again, this picture was taken a bit later on, because this lovely lady was only a little lady when she met Carlo. The marriage was arranged again as a result from the Poland succession, war of succession, and she is only 13. And it's a marriage in, if you believe, made in heaven. And she is a wonderful person, very well educated, considering her age. And so Naples at last have got the queen, the king and queen. She's not Italian, but she'll do for the moment, because she is really educated, with open mind, and she will be always in love with Carlo, and it's really a marriage of love. And so we have a picture, please. And as just a little lad there at the age of 8 is one of their children. Now, I don't say much about him because that's a different story altogether, but there he is our Ferdinando. Ferdinando is the one who will succeed Carlo and Maria Amalia di Sassonia. That was the queen's name. So Maria Amalia di Sassonia, the daughter of the Polish king Augustus III. And there is little Ferdinando, who sadly proves to be a different type of person altogether, but that is another story. Let's enjoy Carlo. Now, this is a beautiful picture from the time of soon after the arrival of Carlo. This picture was painted by Van Wittel. He was a Dutch painter, and the fame, as you can see, is because he was an amazing painter. You can see in the background, right at the top of the hill, is that Sant'Elmo, which was a castle, and it was also a chartreuse, una certosa, di monaci benedettini. And so you can see no buildings around. So this is an actual picture of the 18th century Naples. And you see not much buildings, right? Not many buildings. And then we have the center of the town. Piazza Mercato is on the right, and the palace is here, is the royal palace. The royal palace was already built by the Spanish viceroys, and now is the turn of Carlo to live in this place, but he wants it beautified, or he wants it more grandiose, and he employs the son of this painter. And because Van Wittel was difficult to pronounce, they make it into Van Vitelli, which is quite funny, really. And so we have Luigi Van Vitelli, who will then be followed by his son, Carlo Van Vitelli. Right, this is the building as it is today. You can see it's the Palazzo Reale again, and you can see statues at the front and the porticos, quite grandiose, and they are all the kings or the powers behind the throne, if you like, throughout the centuries. On the left, we have the most wonderful place, very dear to my heart, and it's Palazzo San Carlo, is San Carlo's Theatre. It's at the corner from the Royal Palace, and here we see the actual front of the old, again, it's an old print of the San Carlo Theatre. It was built in only 270 days. So you can imagine, absolutely amazing. This was a very typical attitude of Carlo. Carlo arrives, he sees these people need his help, he sees the potentials of the place, but he wants to create jobs. And so the manual workers now are working and they're putting food on the table. Here it is. Here is the inside of the Palazzo San Carlo as it was then and as it is today. Look at the royal box. The royal box is, or was really at the time, all a series of corridors that went straight into the royal palace. So the king and queen could just go through there with the slippers on almost and sit and enjoy the opera. There it is, that's the opposite view of the royal box. Very grandiose. And next. And here is another shot at a different angle. And here is the most wonderful ceiling depicting the sun and depicting the gods and goddesses and depicting music, of course, because Carlo, when he gets to Naples, after all the sorrowful tales, he finds a very unexpected surprise: music. He finds music everywhere. Music has been surviving through all the viceroys and the terrible events, but is in the hands of the church. And all the abbés, the priests are the ones who are in charge of teaching young people to sing. And it's the period greatly rich in conservatory, and you have people from the poor people being paid by the church first. When Charles arrived, when Carlo arriva a Napoli, sono pagati dalla Chiesa, e poi dopo Carlo funds many of these organizations where little children get board and lodging in these musical places, and they learn to sing, they learn music, which they would have never done. This is today San Carlo from the outside. This is the insignia right at the top. And now we move to what I call les grands oeuvres, the big works. Of course, San Carlo was one of them. So San Carlo is one of the first grands oeuvres that are going to be achieved. We are now in 70, I forgot to tell you that the San Carlo was built in 1737, and then we are now moving to another place of magnificence, and that is the Capodimonte, which I'm sure so many of you will have heard, and it's a royal place, a royal palace. So at the moment we got the royal palace down the level of the port of Naples. Then this is up on the top of a hill called Capodimonte, which means top of the hill. And here is the facade. And this brings me, I've got to say very quickly, but I've mentioned the Vanvitelli, father and son, and we see the triumph of the neoclassical style. Baroque is out, neoclassical is in. And what does that entail? Well, that entails purity of forms. That entails the great love that Carlo had for Vitruvius. Vitruvius in the Architettura, the famous man of the Latin times, the Roman times, wanted to see the connection, believed in a connection between man and the universe, and the purity of forms, symmetrical but beautiful. The Baroque is out. The Baroque is confusing. The Baroque is not a pure style, but this one is. And here we have an example of this beautiful royal palace, we have un salotto, un salottino, all in porcelain. You will have obviously known about Capodimonte, the big porcelain factory of the time, and this is one of the most beautiful examples of their work. And these are just some center tables. They are not too big, but big enough to go at the center of a table. Very beautiful faces, all porcelain. There again, one depicting food. Capodimonte specialized in the details, in the beauty of the clothing, and it was really a treat, and nowadays they are worth a lot of money. And this is the presepe scene, the manger scene. One of the famous one that is in one of the museums in Capodimonte. Of course, there are many of this sort, and they're all in porcelain, and all with real brocade clothing. And this is only one part of a presepe, of a nativity scenes, because these presepes are huge, and they are, of course, they are very much for the Christmas period, but they are on view all the time. Right, then we get to another grand oeuvre, and that is the Royal Palace of Portici. Now, I forgot to mention the fact that the Capodimonte that we saw was actually built to allocate all the Tesoro Farnese that Carlo had inherited from his mother, and he wanted to be on view in the Capodimonte. Now, this is another grand oeuvre, because grand oeuvre, and it's a Royal Palace of Portici. As you can see, a very, very bare building all around this country with the Vesuvius very near, and it's the purpose for that is to collect and keep all the treasures found in the excavations of Pompeii and Ercolano, which of course has got Carlo's name. He gave the go-ahead, and you can imagine all the treasures that are still found today, but he was the beginner of that. Right, now we're coming to the actual masterpiece. So let's keep a count. You've got one royal palace in Naples itself, one up on the top on the hill, Capodimonte. Then we got Portici, and now this is the absolute gem in the crown. We have the Royal Palace of Caserta. Now, Caserta, I have really got to go very fast now, is not far from Naples, 36 kilometers from Naples, and this is the exterior. You can see again the lovely styles, the neoclassical period, and it's grandiose. It was to be, and it's, for so long, it was the biggest royal palace in the whole of Europe. And I cannot tell you the grandiosity, you can see it yourself, but the treasures that are inside, with travertino marble, gems everywhere, you can see. Now, this is just a little example of the major entrance, travertino marbles, all different colors, absolutely grandiose. And like this sort of staircase, we have great numbers, 34 are the staircases like this, and we have 40 rooms which are beautifully decorated with frescoes. And this is the Cappella Palatina, the chapel with precious stones and gold decorations and marble again. This is one of the ambassadors' room where the king and queen would see their guests. Having said that, this is the opus magnus of Vanvitelli, father and son, and they will be with Carlo for many, many years to come for this particular fantastic building that was started in 1752, and it was not going to be finished in a hurry. But the most incredible thing that I want you to see is in a minute. We just go through, look, this is the cappella with the marbles, and this is the theater, the Teatro di Corte, done on the same lines as the San Carlo in Naples. Yeah, you can see the royal box, and then we get the outside of that palace in Caserta. Now you can see the incredible view. You see the palace now, it's at the back, and we are coming away from the palace that's in the back, and there is all this ensemble of fountains, sculptures, and the incredible feat of architecture. There is like an optical illusion when you think the end is near, as to say, but it isn't, and it's a very, very amazing stretch that goes on an area of 47,000 square meters. And we have this beauty, this symmetry, this classicism, again, that Vanvitelli, father and son, are able to execute. Look, I'll go very fast now because you can see for yourself. That is the other end. So you can see it's almost as if it's going up into the trees, and that's what that is the end. So one where we are sitting now was the palace, and now this it's looking at the other side, and the other side is the big electrical works, the works for the cascades. And the Vanvitelli did all of this, the engineering, the architecture, everything. You can imagine what was necessary to build this with camels and elephants, apparently. I don't believe about the elephant, but anyway, immense work, absolutely stunning. But on the best is yet to come. Here it is the Acquedotto Carolino, Carolino from Carlo, from his name, and he has this idea, and these architects built the aqueduct that goes across the Apennines, the Campana, the Acquedotto across the Appennino Campano, to bring the water to the valley. So it goes through, we can imagine in those days, doing trafori di montagne, etc., etc., but the water is actually brought long distances in the valley, and the people in the valley will receive the water and they will be able to irrigate. And this is the absolute treasure that I think, for me anyway, this is San Leucio. San Leucio is the end of this huge complex. So you have Caserta is the name in general, but then is including all these major works. What is this? This is an experiment in a commune. It's a place where the poor people, the people who haven't got a job, can go and find employment. Why? Because Carlo has had this idea of planting the mulberry bushes and to introduce everything that's necessary for the silk manufacturing. So we got the worms from the silk, and it creates a whole commune and community of works and houses and schools for the children. It's absolutely magnificent, and he sends the best ones to find out about how you can work the silk. And to this day, we still have all the implants there in position. Right, well, what else have we got? This is one of my favorite closing images, is the Reggia, La Reggia di Caserta, as you can see it, in the surrounded by the grounds in the shape of a violin. I think this is absolutely magic. And unfortunately, there is no time, but at least you've had a taste. You've had a taste of what my Carlo was able to do. He was always behind these architects, working with them to see how he could improve the conditions of the people there. And to this day, we got all the silk manufacturing there that actually provides kings and queens like our Queen Elizabeth of this country, and the American presidents with beautiful silk manufactures. Right. So much to tell you, so little time. However, I will have to finish now, and just to finish off, what happens in the end? Well, what happens in the end is this, that this is really important. Lo and behold, the King of Spain, which is, if you remember, Carlos' dad, dies. His son, another son from the previous marriage, becomes king. No children, and then the son dies. And so who comes to the fore is Carlo. Our Carlo has to leave the kingdom of Naples, where he's worked so hard and he's loved every minute of it, and the people of the poor people, the Neapolitans, have worshipped him. And sadly, then the saddest moment is when he had to leave. He had to leave Spain with his lovely wife and with one son, and he had to leave for Spain. And he took up the throne in Spain. And so Carlo, at the age of 43 only, in 1759, leaves Naples behind, and the Neapolitans are in absolute mourning. Sorry to leave on that note, but there are so many things to say, but this Carlo was the amazing king who cared for the people who became his people. Thank you.
Grazie mille, Francesca. Thank you very much for that, to introduce many of us really to the beautiful, history of your city, of Naples. Of course, Francesca, I know you are to condensate, to talk only for about an hour. I'm sure you can talk much more. I will be very, very happy to have you again. Maybe after the summer, and maybe explore other aspects of the story of your city, Naples. Grazie mille.
Thank you.
Grazie. I would like to ask any of you comments.
Peter.
Peter.
I would like to say that in 1958, when I was in Naples, I visited the Cathedral of St. Gennaro and witnessed the liquefaction of the martyr's blood.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing this.
Yeah.
Would any other comments? Tony.
Hi. Good evening. Thank you, Francesca. That's fascinating. I wondered how long it would take you to go around a palace as big as the Caserta, having wandered through some National Trust properties and walked myself to exhaustion. It's 400 meters long on the front of it, I read. Just imagine how many rooms you'd have to go around. I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you to Dante Loughborough, but also Dante throughout the new community that we've met during this strange time that we're living in. People in Aberdeen and Manchester, and we've been very privileged to see some of their excellent presentations. And thank you for all of that. And thank you for fetching up and representing Nottingham.
Thank you. I enjoyed
Excellent.
it very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Grazie, Tony. Thank you. I think I see someone, it's a Galaxy Tab A. Is it Andres? You want to ask a question, or where is this one here? Maybe no? No? Okay. Any other comments or question for Francesca?
I just wanted to say how much we enjoyed it, you know, and these are things, particularly Caserta inside, that they are seldom shown even in Italian television.
Yes.
So it's fantastic that you contextualize the construction of these buildings. Thank you very much, Francesca. Fantastic.
Thank you.
What I'd like to say is, where is the castle?
Well, which one? Which castle?
There's a big castle when you come, if you were coming across from Sorrento to the Bay of Naples. You can see this big castle. It's not far from the, there's a...
From the port? From the port? Yes. Well, that is a...
Lomo.
Do you mean from the port of Naples, from the harbour? The big castle with the turret?
Is it the Castle Uomo or Uovo?
No. That is Castel del Lobo. No, that is the one in the sea, isn't it? That's the castle in the sea. No, that is a very, very early castle. It's got nothing to do with our king, Carlo di Borbone. But there were more than one castles all around. And of course, these royal palaces are still in Naples and are wonderful, wonderful sites. And when Carlo had to leave Naples, because the rule was that in order to get to Spain and to get the Spanish crown, suddenly he had to let go of Naples.